What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. It's our weekly show where we review the magic stories as they're posted on Wizard's website. And this week we are back with more of the M19 story. In fact, story 5 of 8 with Chronicle of Bolas, Blood and Fire by Kate Elliott. And again, once again by Kate Elliott. My quick review at the top of this one, there's really not much that I can say to describe this story without giving a lot of it away. Mm-hmm. I would say it was interesting enough to warrant you reading it. It answers a lot of questions that some people may have had for many, many, many years. And so, yeah, I recommend this one, if only for its uniqueness.
Okay.
I don't know what your thoughts are.
I find it interesting that you use the word uniqueness. Because I feel like my expectations were much higher than the finished product.
That's fair, and we'll talk about that, absolutely.
That's my short review.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So yeah, as we always say, feel free to check the description below. We will have a link to the article. If you did not get a chance to read it, we suggest you check the description, click on that link, and go read the article first. Absorb it in its intended manner, and then feel free to come back here afterwards so that you can hear our opinions and give us yours, because that's how this show works. So, onto the full review itself, we had the long-awaited Elder Dragon War story, and we'll talk at the end of whether that delivered on the quote-unquote promises that, you know, we may have thought we were going to get, but kind of starting from the top almost. We were still with Naeva, Baeshia, and Yasova. Sorry, there's a moth in here. Naeva, Baeshia, Yasova, and Taejin, the rest of the clan as well. And you had the continuation from last week, but it talked about the Dragon Tempest. To be completely honest, all of the discussions of the Dragon Tempest could have been removed and nothing would have changed from this story, I feel like.
I feel like that's a fact. Like,
they were super afraid of the Dragon Tempest, and then when it was all said and done, they were like scared of it, and then it was gone, and then a Tarka showed up. But a Tarka didn't come out of the temp. We already knew that a Tarka was a thing because they'd been afraid of them, but they were saying with the Tempest that it was newly birthed dragons, so what the hell was the point of the whole Tempest thing? Like, why didn't it just go right into the Atarka stuff? I don't fully understand the purpose behind that in the story and what it gave us at the end of it. I felt like we didn't gain anything by the time we were done learning about the fact that there was a Dragon Tempest. Mm-hmm. I just thought that was a little odd of an addition, especially because, and not that this is a bad thing necessarily, because I'm enjoying these, you know, two-piece stories where we're following two different timelines, basically. I'm enjoying the Yasova part of the timeline greatly, probably more so than I think I would have if you had just kind of on the side described to me what we were going to be seeing, that we were going to be seeing, like, Yasova Dragonclaw and her two grandchildren, traveling around with their pack, finding ways to tell stories so that we can learn more about Nicol Bolas' evolution. Like, I would have been like, okay, cool, so I'm just going to be sitting there the whole time waiting for the Nicol Bolas stuff and not caring about the Yasova stuff. But it really was both. I'm enjoying both parts, like I said, pretty equally. But I still felt like this beginning part, before the story actually began, the flashback part of the story, I thought it was a little longer than usual, and especially with the introduction of this Dragon Tempest that I don't think we really needed.
Right.
It seems like an odd choice to have made. So.
That moth was all up on me.
I noticed. It's now it's way over there, so hopefully it won't be bothering us much anymore.
Hopefully it stays there.
Then, talking about, a few weeks ago we talked about parallels. There was one story that was like all about parallels being thrown out constantly, and there were little bits of it here and there in other stories, and that includes this week, very slight. But in the first part, before the flashback story begins, we had Naeva kind of once again paralleling Nicol Bolas, where in the past it was Naeva and Baeshia's relationship being similar to the other twins in Nickel and Ugin. Now it was really just Naeva, which is interesting that Beishia was not as much part of this story because Ugin was in no way part of this story. So Beishia was barely talked about.
Referenced a couple of times.
Yeah, she was talked about a couple of times, but
no, Ugin, I mean.
Ugin was talked about, but he wasn't like his voice was like echoing in Nickel's head in much the same way that, you know, Naeva was doing her thing, but also constantly aware of Beishia's presence and like where she was. So again, even more parallels than I had even written notes about.
More parallels that were less blatant.
Yes.
Which made them good.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And the more blatant one that I made a note of here was the moment where Naeva is talking to Feck, because Naeva and Feck are like forced to travel together, or Naeva's forced to travel with Feck. Feck did not seem to care. But Naeva is forced to travel with Feck, and you get to find out that, you know, Naeva's like, why can't I travel with the hot guy? You know, Taejin's hot, I want to stay with him. Plus, you know, I'd totally be better than Beishia at it, so. But, you know, then Feck starts kind of getting on her nerves, and she says that she wishes that she, like, you know, to herself, that she wishes she was a dragon so she could burn him. That's super Nickel Bolas-y, right? Just like the concept of, like, I'm so mad I just want to kill you, you know, that seemed very, at least early Bolas, and I mean, Naeva is spoken of as young, so it's that idea of like a lack of experience being, you know, she's ambitious and stuff, so.
Well, I was very surprised to hear that line. I don't know, I guess I saw it as more of like a joking conversation almost. Or
okay.
Like I don't know.
What, that Feck was kind of like hassling her, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
like,
fair.
I didn't think she was actually upset about it, really.
Right.
Until you said that line, and I was like, oh. All right.
Yep. Yeah.
Not the impression I got, but that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we had a Tarka show up, and the interesting thing, I mean, I get that Tarka is a dragon lord. There are 5 different dragon lords, and they all kind of have their own thing. But Tarka in all of these stories, and I may have said this before, but Tarka in all of these stories, whether she's just being referenced or now that she's actually present and speaking to us, she is super one note. Like that, there is one thing that she talks about, and that is it. And I get that may very well be because she is supposed to be unintelligent, and so there's only that one thing that she can focus on. But as a character, it just makes her super boring and predictable.
Yeah.
The only thing, I did write down a quote from her that I super enjoy, but that's just because I enjoy it. It was something that I liked, was that she's like, words are pointless or something. They're not tasty like meat. What does that mean? I love it. Don't get me wrong, but what is it? What does that mean? Like,
it means you need to start eating words and see what they are tasty like. Maybe they taste like sushi or like veggies.
Yeah, I don't think Tarka fishes much to get sushi. Maybe from, you know, the tribes that worship her. But yeah, I liked that line a lot. I thought it was pretty funny. Then we get into the story itself that Taejin tells to satisfy Tarka and make sure that she doesn't eat him, like she did that Enoch. And Taejin starts with like a random story, and then Tarka's like, that's not a story. So then Taejin starts another one, but doesn't quite know where he's going with it, and then starts again. And when Tarka gets upset with how the story begins, and Taejin changes that story, he changes it to talk about the Elder Dragon War, or at least like where he left off last week, right? With Ugin having left, and then what happens with Nickel and the whole group of people. But for the first time, and we'll talk about this more at the end, but for the first time, the story is now not from anyone's perspective. Mm-hmm. All of the other stories have been told from Ugin's perspective, but now Ugin's gone.
Right.
So now to hear about what happens later, it's told from like an omnipotent perspective, which is a storytelling or as a way of storytelling where there's just a narrator essentially who is omnipotent, meaning that they see all and they know all. They know what all the characters are thinking. They know about all of their motivations. They know all of their movements and why they are doing those things.
Right.
So we got that. We got those explanations and stuff like that in this story. And like I said, we'll jump back to that at the end. But we had a lot of interesting things here. The story starts by talking about humans and dragons, and the humans being dragon killers. But when a Tarka seems to get upset, the storytelling mode shifts a little. And if you notice the language that's used there, it really was like, these fickle, feeble, weak humans trying to fight and kill these amazing, opulent, perfect dragons, really laying it on thick with we're impressed by you, Atarka. Please don't eat us and kill us all, You are more powerful than us and you always will be, and we have never thought otherwise. And
we love you so
right.
much.
And,
please don't kill us.
Right. And don't mistake the tone in my voice. I loved it. I thought that made perfect sense. We'll talk a little bit more about the explanation for the story and how that works into it at the end, but regardless, into the story itself, then once it actually gets rolling, we find out a couple of things. One that I found interesting was that Nicol Bolas' nickname in this story is now referenced as being the second son. Son, S-U-N, not S-O-N. And the fact that those of us that have been following along the story since Amonkhet, will know that the second son was a thing in the story, and it was when the second son appeared between the horns, which again is indicative of the gem of becoming that is in between Nicol Bolas' horns later on. It also that second son also was to depict the return of the God Pharaoh, aka Nicol Bolas. So the fact that the second son is Nicol Bolas' nickname, but that he also used a second son to indicate his return, super flavorful.
Brilliant.
So cool. And again, I love that they're able to add all of these things in that they're not rewriting history so much,
right.
but they're filling in holes. I mean, again, the fact that Ugin Plains walks away explains why he's not part of the Elder Dragon War, because we didn't see him in Legends. So there was that. I loved it. Again, super, super flavorful, and I like calling stuff like that out when it happens, when we see it. Then we have kind of the first volley in the Elder Dragon War, which is Vivictus's brood versus Nicol Bolas and his human hunters army. And then once the brood is defeated, that kind of attack that settlement, the army and Nicol Bolas then go after Vivictus and come across Vivictus and his other 3 underlings, along with, and they do so by following a coward, basically. One of the dragons who sees all the other ones getting defeated and runs away. And the army follows suit, and Vivictus flies back over with the other 3 following, and has the coward dragon in his claws. And I was saying to Amy, that's super tropey, where you show that a villain is evil by having one of his or her minions or underlings come up and say, we're sorry, we failed in our mission, please forgive us, and either the villain says that they forgive them and then kills them, or just straight up kills them for failing in their mission. It's well, you're useless to me, dead, right? I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen that happen. And it really is a way for the story to show you, no, they're evil.
Right.
Don't get it twisted. Sure, they tried to do this evil thing, but no, they themselves are also just straight up evil. So, and also are not unwilling to get their hands dirty.
Right.
Right? Because with some evildoers, they're like all about the henchmen, and the henchmen do everything, like the Lex Luthor types almost, where like they're behind the scenes so that if anything happens, they can sit back and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't believe that happened. And then, but then this is an example of showing you like, no, like even though they're the big boss, they're also evil and willing to kill.
Right.
So, and then I just thought that it was super cool, the fact that then Vivictus was super willing to just fly that dead dragon over and just drop it on Nicol Bolas's army, killing a bunch of them outright, injuring a ton of them, so that they had to then scramble to try to save the injured. Like, that was a really clever way of doing things. And again, unlike a Tarka...
Very resourceful.
Yes. And, well, yeah, like you see, like using their resources that are available to them, which is this dead body that, he's not useful to you in life, so make him useful to you in death. And unlike a Tarka, it really showed some intelligence and cleverness in Vivictus's methods, where, sure, he's an evil prick, but at the same time, he knows how to fight and knows...
He's got a brain.
Right. And so even coming up against an army, he's willing to just drop this dragon on them. So I thought that was a cool moment as well. We learn from this fight that some of the people say that the dragon blood protects them from fire. That was something new. I mean, last week we learned why they were like drinking it or trying to like cover themselves in it because for religious purposes. But now you find out that it's protects them against dragon fire, which may have been, because you kind of hear about that stuff all the time, right? Where people do things because it's tradition, and they don't necessarily fully understand why that tradition was started, but there was a good reason for the tradition starting. So maybe that's a situation where that's a thing, where like someone straight up knew, like, hey, I got covered in dragon blood and then they shot fire at me and I lived. Maybe it's a good idea for us to be covered in dragon blood, and then it just over the years or over the centuries or whatever got translated into, hey, for our religion it's a good idea to be covered in dragon blood. And so now maybe they're rediscovering the rationale behind why they did it in the first place. Again, just a thought, no proof behind that, but it makes sense to me. And so then we have kind of the bigger topics that I wanted to talk about with this story. We had the Elder Dragon War. And this was a war that has been discussed, at least broadly, on the concept of the Elder Dragon War. It's been discussed broadly since these legendary Elder Dragons were brought up in Legends, right? They were characters in Legends. We knew there was an Elder Dragon War. And now it's like we're finally going to get a story description of the Elder Dragon War. And I say finally because I am not privy to any of the books that may have told that story in more detail previously. And if there is such a book, if it is not digital, I know some of the Magic stories recently have been made available on like Kindle and things like that. We have not had the time or the availability to seek those out. But if those stories...
Especially since we don't have a Kindle.
Right. Well, whatever. Yes, we could borrow one. But, yeah. If those stories do exist, then we've just missed them, and that's fine. But even then, a modern telling of the Elder Dragon War with present-day knowledge and information, I bring up the question. Because I know how I, knee-jerk reaction feel about it. I think that the Elder Dragon War portion of this story was told well. I thought that the things that were written were interesting, and it properly spoke of Arcades Sabbath, Chromium, Palladia-Mors, and Nicol Bolas, and Vivictus. But I would have liked more of that. I felt like everything that they did to talk about these Elder Dragon characters that they've been building up for the last 4 stories, maybe even, 4.5 with this one, it all culminated to this Elder Dragon War. And obviously I know that there's more to talk about in the next 3 stories, 6, 7, and 8, because as I mentioned last week, I assumed this week we were going to be getting to the Planeswalkers, Tezzeret, Johnny, Liliana, etc., and we didn't. And I wanted more from this story for the Elder Dragon War, but at the same time, I'm aware of how much longer that story would have been, or the fact that they didn't have that many weeks to cover all of that information. So, I don't know. Before I go on, did you seem to have somewhat agreed with the fact that it was summarized?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was really the part where I was much more disappointed than I would have thought in weeks prior.
Okay.
I would be with a story addressing this topic.
Right. Right, because we haven't seen a ton of, like, fight sequences or things like that in these stories, and maybe that's the intention. Maybe the intention is to not have it be super amped up because we're about to go into Ravnica where there's probably going to be a ton of that. So maybe this is like the palate cleanser where we're just learning back information, but
Yeah, but this shouldn't... I don't know. Maybe that's just... I don't know, maybe that's just my weird biased opinion, but I don't think this should be a palate cleanser. Like, this is the preamble to that.
Mm-hmm.
This is the information that we need to understand what's going to happen in Ravnica.
Yeah.
So if people have been missing stuff, this is where they really need to start.
Right.
So to me, this shouldn't be just some thrown together thing that sort of helps people understand Bolas a bit more before his real stories happen.
Right.
To me, these are his real stories.
Mm-hmm.
And Ravnica and whatever he does on Ravnica is just the culmination of them. And so, just the finishing point.
Right.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's kind of unbalanced, I think. I don't know. We still have more stories to go before then.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just a little disappointed because I think I was ready to hear this information in a story in such a way that it would, at the very least, keep me interested. And I feel like this did not. And I feel like it was very... it was like a watered down version of what I expected.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. It's weird for me because I try to like see both sides and then I know that I'm on one side, right? But I see the other side. Here I genuinely feel like I'm 50-50 on it. Like I feel like I was somewhat disappointed by the fact that there wasn't more description given, but I also feel like it was written so well and told to us so well in the small snippets that we got for each one of them that I don't know that I need much more because I feel like my imagination and my understanding of these characters can fill in those blanks. And I guess that just depends on who you are as a reader and whether you like to have to fill in those blanks or not. Whether you would like for a professional author to write all of that stuff for you so that you can read it in their professional manner of telling that story. Because that's kind of arguably that's their job, right? Is to entice you and interest you with their way of weaving words together, or you as a fan can fill in those blanks for yourself of how that kind of in more detail may have gone down.
I just think that this isn't the time or the place for filling in blanks. Like, the story should be doing that for us for this section of stories because, I'll say it again if you want, this part is the most important part because what happens after this is just the end.
And
this is the beginning and the middle and the meat. This is the everything that will get us to the eventuality of Ravnica.
Right. Yeah.
And so I just feel like it's not right to expect us to fill in blanks. I think it's more important to make sure that those details are actually written, because later on, in the end of the story, being Ravnica, if we are filling in blanks, then that's one thing. But I think in order to understand how we got to Ravnica, we can't be filling in blanks on our own.
No, that's fair. That's fair, I guess. It's so weird to me because I'm genuinely curious.
That might just be the way I see it, you know?
Well, and I'm thinking about the fact that, you know, these stories, the M19 stories, have been just good.
Yeah.
Just all of them have been good. And we came off of Dominaria where we couldn't say that.
Right.
In my opinion, right? In our opinion. And I feel like many people's opinions, but not everybody's. Where I would say it wasn't like, not all of them were good. Some of them were great, but not all of them were good. And in these,
and that's just really disappointing because of how flavorful the set should have been.
Well, but that's why I bring it up, is because, like, now we're in the M19 stories where it's the core set, right? This is not your main storyline. You know, we're in the past now, wholly in the past, and yet these stories are kicking ass in terms of, like, telling us what's going on, helping us to understand it, and filling in some of those blanks that maybe people didn't think they needed filling in, but now those stories are being arguably rewritten, but like retold for a newer audience, and they're doing such a good job of it that when you hit a moment like this where you stop and you're like, wait, why wasn't more of that in there? I think it's just because we've been spoiled these last couple of weeks. If this story were on Dominaria, I don't know, like, obviously it's set on Dominaria, but I mean, if it were from the Dominaria set of stories, I don't know that we'd be like, why wasn't this better? Like, we'd be like, this was amazing, because it's just, like, so much better than so many other things that we've gotten so far. So I'm curious if we're, like, blinded by the fact that, like, these were all amazing, and then this one did a summary, as opposed to a full-on step-by-step storytelling, because we might have needed a few more weeks. Now, many, if not all, hardcore Vorthos that I have read comments and stuff from would probably tell you the more the better, right? Give us more information. But I guess this gives an opportunity, and I'm not this guy, but there are many out there, and they're super talented. But I like the fact that this could breed fan fiction, for example. So if you're one of those people, let us know. I would love to hear. I feel like it could breed so much creativity in people to fill in, like, Arcades versus Vevictus, or Palladia-Mors versus Vevictus, or, you know, whatever. Like, these different pairings of, you know, what brings Chromium in? Like, what moment is it that Chromium decides to join the fight? Like, all of these things, as, I don't want to say plot holes, but plot points that were broadly discussed and could be discussed in more detail. Maybe that's what that is. Maybe that's a call for, like, hey, there are a bunch of talented Vorthos out there, like,
maybe,
you know, write it. And honestly, I mean, this is like the biggest pipe dream in the world, and again, I am not that guy, but for those fanfic writers out there, if you do a good enough job, I mean, Wizards is clearly looking for authors for their stories upcoming, so hey, you know, dare to dream, right? But seriously, if that's something that you do, if that's something that you think would be a cool idea, and you're gonna do it, let us know. We would love to hear all about it. So, but that's kind of where my head leans, or, you know, where my thoughts lean in terms of what to do with this missing information. Like, I feel like it was all there. You just have to kind of go on a little bit of a walk to get there. And as Amy said, some people might not feel like they want to go on that kind of a walk. So there's that. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was the method of storytelling. And mainly Tae-Jin's method of storytelling. While I was reading this story, I'm thinking to myself in the back of my head, I'm like, what is happening here? All of these other stories, and I mentioned it at the top, all these other stories were told from, like, Ugin's perspective, but now Ugin's gone. And so you can't have a story from Ugin's perspective. And so instead you have this story that Tae-jin is telling, but it's from no one's perspective.
Yeah.
And so, who told him this story? Where did this story come from? Why? And I'm reading the story, and the whole time I'm like, whose voice is this in? Because all the others were in someone's voice, and Tae-jin is recounting it, so clearly it was someone. And it's like, is this really like God? Right? Like, is there truly an omnipotent presence that is giving all of this information after the fact into Tae-jin's mind or into his mother's brain that she then tells to him or something? It was so odd to me, and I was really ready to come into this review and just rip that to pieces. And then the end of the story cleared everything up in that it was a supernatural phenomenon, and Tae-jin genuinely has no idea where it came from. And while that is not an explanation, it is.
Right.
Because it says it cannot be explained.
Right.
And because they focused on it in that way, 10 out of 10. I loved that. Because, again, I'm the guy sitting there going, this is stupid. Like, who the hell is this? And then they tell me that he, the storyteller, doesn't understand where it came from. He's like, I was going to tell this completely different story. And I just didn't. You know, and I don't know why I told that one, but I did. And so, brilliant. Perfectly executed. I loved it. I thought it was flawless.
Yeah.
In that way, because it really was something that like was in the back of my mind throughout the entire story. You know, at least I would say the latter half of the story. And then it was just answered for me, whereas I was ready to be like, this is dumb. Like, why? What the hell? Who's this by? And it was answered for me. So props, Kate, because you got me on that one. Like 100% hook, line, and sinker. You had me right to the end.
You got me.
She did. It was really, really good. I really appreciated that. And I like moments like that as a reader where I feel like I've got one over on the author, right? I'm like, this is dumb. What the hell? And then the author like comes out of nowhere and just punches me in the face. Right. And they're like, wake up, idiot. Here it is. And it's like, you got me. They're well done. So yeah, I appreciated that greatly. I will say, though, to save a little bit of face for myself, it had to have, I mean, I guess it didn't have to be, but the only reason that it leads me to believe that it was in someone else's voice is because, like, a particular entity's voice, is because of the beginning of the story, like I mentioned, where Tae-jin seemed to be embellishing the adjectives that he was using to describe the humans as weak and petty and small versus the dragons that are big and scary and overlordy and amazing, because he was talking to a Tarka and didn't want to die. And it's like, if that's the case, then that wouldn't be the way that the story was told to you. You were embellishing it, but then you didn't know where the story came from because that wasn't the story you were intending to tell. So there was that little bit of nitpicking that I could do. But again, still, like 99.9% of it is props because they got me. But then that last, 0.1% is like, but then how did he embellish the language in the beginning to appease a Tarka? I thought that was odd.
Yeah.
No? Thoughts?
Because whoever wrote the story initially, or whoever's perspective it's actually from,
right,
did that.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it was put in Tae-jin's brain in that way as a way to save him from a Tarka's wrath.
Right.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, honestly, like, I want everyone's opinions on literally everything we talk about ever. But yeah. I really am curious about what you guys think about the Elder Dragon War. Were you satisfied with the way that it was given to us? Were you not satisfied? Do you think that it would welcome some fan fiction, and so you're going to be keeping an eye out for it or writing some yourself? Or do you think that it was a little bit of a rush job in that it was like, hey, you should have given this some more time. It is the Elder Dragon War. Any and all, and maybe more than that, less than that, I'd love to know it. And same with this, do you think I'm nitpicking on that story and how Tae-jin told it? Do you agree with Amy's assessment of it, that it was just, that's the way that it was being told to him? Anything and everything, as always, you can let us know in the comments below. And to get Amy's heart pumping a bit, that would be an example of you joining us in showing off your...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
There you go. That's right. So I think that's going to be it for this week. Like I said, 6, 7, and 8 are still coming next week and the weeks to come. So definitely stay tuned for that. We will have those, so subscribe. The button will pop up right here. You can click on that. And if you're interested in product openings, not everyone is, and that's totally fine. But I did open an M19 pre-release kit this past Monday that went up on the channel. I'm like stuttering like crazy now. But wherever that pops up on the screen, if you want to click on that, there was an interesting misprint/mistake in the kit that I thought was kind of interesting, something I'd never really seen before. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely go check that video out. You can check out the rest of our JaAR videos. Stay tuned for those. But first and foremost, I want to thank you all so much for watching. This has been another episode of JaAR here on Geek for All. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.